Hello, and welcome to our podcast. Today, we will be discussing the adolescent brain. My name is Kieran, and I will be talking about the brain structure. Also with us is Ashley, who will talk about the development of the adolescent brain. Michael will speak about risk-taking, Cullum will discuss hormones, and finally Raymond will speak about mental health. What is an adolescent? The word adolescent originates from the Latin verb aldecere, which means to grow into maturity. Adolescence is a period in a person's life which follows childhood and is before adulthood. Now moving on to the brain structure. As you can see in the diagram, the brain has 6 main components. The cerebellum only accounts for 10% of the brain's volume, and it contains over 50% of the total number of neurons in the brain. It is involved in maintenance of balance and posture, coordination of voluntary movement, motor learning and cognitive functions. The occipital lobe contains an area called the primary visual cortex, which receives inputs from the retina of the eye. This is where the mind interprets colour and other aspects of vision. The occipital lobe is also important for reading and reading comprehension. The parietal lobe is responsible for sensory processes that have to do with taste, temperature and touch. Humans would not be able to feel sensations of touch if the parietal lobe was damaged. The frontal lobe, in essence, is the control panel of our personality and our ability to communicate. It's also responsible for primary motor functions, problem solving, memory, language and judgment. And finally, the temporal lobe. The temporal lobe mainly revolves around hearing and selective listening. It receives sensory information such as sound and speech from the ears. And now Ashley will discuss how the brain develops during adolescence.
The human brain is under construction until our mid-20s. It undergoes extensive remodelling in this time, resembling a network and wiring upgrade. The adolescent brain begins to develop, maturing from back to front, and the prefrontal cortex is last to be developed. As we know, this area of the brain is responsible for cognitive processes such as reasoning, planning and judgment. Because this area is still developing, teenagers often rely on the amygdala to make decisions more than adults do. This may explain teenagers' irrational behaviour, as the amygdala is associated with emotions, impulses, aggression and instinctive behaviour. Just before puberty, the volume of grey matter in the prefrontal cortex increases. Originally, this was thought to happen in the first 18 months of life only. This grey matter gradually begins to reduce during adolescence through a process called pruning. Connections among neurons in the brain that are not used wither away, while those that are used stay. It is thought that this pruning process makes the brain more efficient by strengthening the connections that are used most often and eliminating the clutter of those that are not used at all. In this diagram, you can see the reduction of synapses as the child gets older. The term use it or lose it is often associated with this process. The corpus callosum, which connects the brain's left and right hemispheres and carries traffic essential to many advanced brain functions, steadily thickens. Stronger links also develop between the hippocampus, a sort of memory directory, and the frontal areas that set goals and weigh different agendas. As a result, we get better at integrating memory and experience into our decisions. Cullum, how do hormones affect the development of the brain?
Well, Ashley, it is widely known that the biological changes an adolescent goes through is due to interchangeable hormone levels. This means that along with physical changes, how they behave also begins to change. This is where the limbic system comes into play. The limbic system consists of a number of different parts which regulates different things such as emotions, learning and the formation of memories. The system itself can be found under the cerebrum and is generally one of the last connections in the brain to fully develop. This leads to a hypersensitivity to hormones and leads to common characteristics of rational behaviour. Hormones are viewed as a way to get the brain to adapt and protect. In this process, a stressful event can influence the structural and functional plasticity of the hippocampus, amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. In turn, alteration in the neuroplasticity of these brain systems can affect patterns of emotional expression and regulation. Dopamine is an essential hormone for the regulation of movement of emotional responses, but is renowned for its imbalance in adolescence. The imbalance can lead to an increase in impulsiveness, susceptibility to addiction, and hyperrationality. This thrill-seeking behaviour occurs as their emotions are not properly regulated. Research shows that when fibres develop in the prefrontal cortex, the need for risk-taking behaviour reduces as dopamine levels begin to balance out.
So, how many of us adults will jump? No. First we will consider a few things. The sharp rocks, what if I slipped and hit the rocks? The temperature of the water, is it deep? The teenage brain works quite differently with less consideration given and a lot more impulsivity demonstrated. Taking risks is a part of life. It is most definitely a part of growing up. If we don't take risks, we never learn about our own capabilities or discover the joy of new experiences. Risks can be good, but risks can also be unhealthy and even dangerous. As we mentioned earlier, the prefrontal cortex develops later than the amygdala, as teens seek out new sensations and new experiences. The underdeveloped prefrontal cortex means their brain has trouble controlling risk-taking impulses and understanding the consequences of their actions. So teens will often respond on impulse rather than think practically and consider the ultimate consequences of their decisions. Peer pressure can have both positive and negative influences on teens. One of the negative influences peer pressure has is encouraging unhealthy risk-taking, but it can also promote teenagers to try new experiences within a controlled environment, which can give a significant positive impact. The desire or need teens have to be accepted and affirmed by their peers can be very strong, sometimes referred to as the cool factor or intimidation factor. This need for acceptance can often result in teenagers choosing to take risks to either impress or be accepted by the group. A study conducted at the National Institute of Health found that teens are more likely to engage in risky driving behaviours such as speeding if they're accompanied by the same gender teens in the car. Reducing unhealthy risk-taking. We need to discuss risk-taking with teenagers, help them learn how to evaluate the risks and anticipate the consequences of their choices. Young teenagers in particular may not always be aware of the risks associated with certain behaviours. Their brains are hardwired to be impulsive, so therefore it is our role to encourage decision-making and making informed choices amongst this peer group. Raymond is now going to talk about mental health.
Mental health is our ability to handle and cope with stress and enjoy our everyday life. It affects how we feel, think, act, and relate to others. Our mental health is just as important as our physical health. Poor mental health is associated with increased risk of disease such as heart disease, cancer, and diabetes. 1 in 5 adolescents experience mental health problems. These mental health disorders can be affected by a family history, an emotional or stressful life event, or even a brain injury. Mental health disorders are so high in adolescence as their brain goes under significant changes during these teenage years. Because of this, there is often changes in their moods and personalities. They may even struggle with simple things such as making decisions and controlling their moods. This leads to them struggling in school and in social situations. 1 in 8 adolescents have experienced depression. This comes from developing feelings of worthlessness, their school performance, their social status with peers, and their family life. These factors have a major impact on how the adolescent feels. Having good mental health has lots of benefits. It allows you to concentrate better, to focus, and makes learning easier. Simple things such as going for a walk, socializing with friends, can maintain a good mental health, which in turn helps maintain good overall health.
So in conclusion, we hope you found this podcast very beneficial and now have a better understanding of the adolescent brain structure and its development. Also the hormonal changes during this time which lead to risk-taking behaviour and in turn affects adolescent mental health.